Hello and welcome to day 2 of Why You Binge Eat. If you are watching this live on the Facebook channel, please say hi. It's great to see you. If you are in my email list, hey Mandy. If you are in my email list and you're watching this later in the day, say hi. I'd love to know who's watching. Today I'm excited to talk about this reason, which happens to be the #1 reason why people binge, okay? Now, without this, you would actually not binge. And I'm sure you're curious to find out what that is. And the answer is urges, okay? So an urge is that overwhelming feeling that you get when you feel like you have to eat. It's so compelling, and if you feel like if you don't give in to the urge of that feeling to eat, that you might die or your brain is going to freak out, okay? That is what an urge is. And think about it. If you never had that feeling, you wouldn't want to binge. It's that easy. And going back to the coaching tools that I teach, the model, our thoughts create our feelings create our actions, and our actions create our results. So you have a thought, which is you see some kind of food and you have the thought, I want that. Now, often this thought is unconscious, but it then creates a feeling of an urge, and that urge is so overwhelming. And so that urge is what drives us to binge. That is the #1 reason why we binge, is because we feel like if we don't give into that urge, that it's going to be so uncomfortable we can't handle it. And when we do give into that urge, that is when the relief comes. But of course, you know it's only temporary relief. So in order to figure out to really stop binge eating, and if really the only reason why you're binge eating is because you have these urges, let's talk a little bit about why we have these urges, okay? Now, there's 2 reasons why we have urges. And the first reason is just because of restriction. Now, our natural response as a human when we feel restricted is to rebel, okay? So when we have a thought, and it causes that urge, and I'm sorry. So I'm going off topic. So with restriction, that's the other example. So with restriction, it's generally when people are trying to restrict their food. So we do this often where we go on diets and we tell us that foods are off limit or that we can't eat that. Or sometimes we even restrict our food so much where we're eating like very few calories, and our animal instinct is to rebel against that. It's like our body tells us like we need nutrition. Like that's our GPS inside of us is like telling us when we feel like we need to eat. And when you're really restricting yourself with food, your natural instinct is to want to rebel, and so you give in. Now, the other thing with restriction is not only caused by actual like malnutrition and like restriction of food that makes our body rebel, but restriction, the feeling, is caused by our thoughts. Now, you have a thought, let's say you're on a diet and you tell yourself, I can't have that, or I can't eat that, or that's off limits. When you start saying those thoughts, it causes the feeling of restriction. And when you do that enough time, your natural instinct is to want to rebel. So what do? You put yourself on a diet, you say you can't have that, you feel restricted, and then eventually you feel deprived, and then you give in, which leads to a binge because you've been feeling restricting so much, you overeat, and then you feel crappy about it. So then you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I overate. I need to restrict my food so that I can make up for all of the calories that I ate, and you go right back into that restriction. So that restriction cycle causes you to urge, like your physical body wants the food when you're restricted. So the solution to this is just not to restrict yourself. Now, I do not mean go and eat whatever you want. I just mean that you have the way that you're eating, that you're not on a diet, and you don't tell yourself that anything is off limits. You can have whatever you want when it's at the right time, at the right amount. So you're able to allow yourself to have small amounts here and there, which prevents you from binging and prevents the urges. Now, the second reason why you binge is because it becomes a habit. Now, we talked a little bit about this yesterday in the brain science and how our brains are actually wired to binge. Now, if you think about it, the very first time you binge, your body, what happens is your mind is like, oh my gosh, that was so good, do that again. So you do it again and you do it again, and then eventually the actual habit of binge eating becomes in your subconscious mind. And then what happens is that you get conditioned. We talked about Pavlov's dogs yesterday. So a great example of this is I live in this wonderful town called Encinitas, and right down the street from me is this market called Lazy Acres. Now, the very first time I went in there, they were giving away samples of cookies. Now, I talk about this all the time, where like cookies are like my thing. Like I used to binge on cookies, like the number one thing. I love cookies. And they have this like heated stone that they put these fresh baked cookies and they give samples. So the first time I went in, they would give me a sample, and then I was like, ooh, I'm gonna buy one. And then I went back the next week and I got a sample and then a cookie, and then the what next week. And then I noticed what was happening is every single time I was driving by Lazy Acres, I noticed I would see the store and then I would immediately want cookies. And that's what that's how it becomes a habit, is because we're triggered by certain things, certain times of the day, by driving by certain places, by seeing certain foods. You know what I'm talking about. You get triggered by certain food cues, and then that, because it's a habit, then you binge, and then you have the urges, which is what gives in. So when you understand that it is our urges that are driving these binges, and that we feel like we have to give into these urges, that is what is causing you to binge. So the solution is long-term. So short-term, the solution is to not give into your urges, okay? So when you feel an urge, you acknowledge it. You go, oh, there's an urge. Then you allow it. And I go into this a lot, so I'm not going to teach actually how to allow an urge, but this is just the process, is you allow it and you choose it willingly. Now, what happens is, over time, the more times that you don't give into the urge, you allow it, your brain is going to rewire itself to not desire the food, and then eventually the urges go away. And this process takes about 30 to 60 days, depending on how wired your brain is. But within 30 to 60 days, you can literally not have those urges. And when you don't have those urges, the struggle's gone. That is when the freedom comes in. That is when you see food and it's no big deal. That is when you get control back. So that is the process that I take my clients through, is learning how to, the skill, because it is a skill set. You don't just get good at it. And the truth is, in the beginning, it's very difficult, but if you have the right tools and you know how to allow it, it becomes super easy. And then you do that enough time and your brain gets rewired, and then you don't desire the food. So just to recap on today, number 2, the number one reason why you binge is because you have urges. And urges are caused by restriction, either by physically restricting food or your thoughts of restriction, or they're caused by the habit of your brain desiring the food over time. And the way that the solution is just to allow the urges to sit with the urges ahead of time, which requires you to be uncomfortable. So you choose the discomfort on the front side of the binge, so you don't give into the binge. You're willing to feel uncomfortable ahead of time, and then on the back side, if you have freedom. Hey, Risa, it's great to see you. On the back side is when you have the freedom, and so that's what this is about, allowing urges. So if you are interested in learning, and I can give you a step-by-step plan for you on how to allow this process of allowing urges so that you can find freedom. This is what I go through in my free mini sessions that I offer. I offer free calls. So if you're feeling stuck, if you're ready to get out of the binge eating cycle, this is your way out. This is my specialty. I can help you get there. So if you're interested, personal message me. You can email me. There's multiple ways to get a hold of me, and I hope that you have a great day.